Hello, I'm Tiffany, and I have not done a book review in a very long time, but I decided that I had just been reading a couple of very good books lately that I needed to share. All of them have to do with the topic of immigration, so timely topic. That's all I'm going to say about that. If you don't know what I mean, you're not paying attention. Anyway, no judgment. We listen and we don't judge. So let's get into it. Here's 4 books that I recommend if you are, at all interested or thinking about what the heck is going on and why is everybody freaking out about immigration right now. So the first book I recommend is called Migrant Aesthetics: Contemporary Fiction and Global Migration and the Limits of Empathy by Glenda R. Carpio. Now, this book is not going to be for everybody. This is literary analysis. But if you like that sort of thing, this book is brilliant. Not only does she kind of break through the idea that if you can just walk the walk of being an immigrant in immigrant's shoes, then we will all feel compassion and empathy for the plight of migration. It really disrupts that idea in a lot of ways and demonstrates the alternate aesthetics that she calls the migrant aesthetics, as she calls it, that push us beyond this limiting form of empathy where we're just oh, that's so sad, this experience, we should have more compassion for people experiencing this, and pushes us into reflection about the nature of immigration, about the ways that it intersects throughout history with policing, criminality, race, class, gender, and makes us think a little bit more about the assumptions that we have around immigration. Anyway, so I'm not actually totally finished reading it yet because there were a lot of books that she does literary analysis on that I hadn't actually read yet. And so I really wanted to have an informed opinion as I'm reading the book. And so I every chapter I pause and read through the list of books that she takes on. And if I haven't read it yet, I acquire the book, read the book, and then read it. So I think I'm 3 more chapters, and then I'll do a more full analysis on my thoughts on that book. But this was one of the books that she, of the chapter I recently finished, Julie Otsuka, The Buddha in the Attic. Now, what I love about this book, it is based in, kind of the turn of the century U.S., the journey. It's a journey from Japan to the U.S. From these women who kind of get catfished a little bit into coming to marry their husbands, but it's not the men they necessarily got pictures of. So early catfishing. The experience of reading this book is it's disarming because it's definitely not told from a one person's perspective. It's many voices kind of in a chorus describing a multitude of experiences. So you can get a through path where there's some commonality in their experience, but for the most part it's just this constant fracturing of the experience itself. So such an enjoyable read, so different than a lot of other novels that that have a more predictable pathway, I guess, a predictable narrative. But one of the things I think is really important, especially in the political moment that we're in, is that by the end of the book, there's the experience of the U.S. interring the Japanese during World War II in these camps, right? They took people from their communities and locked them up in these camps and really questioned their loyalty to the government and to the country, even though they had never at any point been allowed to become citizens of the country. There's a lot of injustices obviously surface in the course of reading it, but the parallel between, and actually Glenda Carpio actually talks about this a bit in the chapter about this book, but the parallel between that detention and the ones we're seeing, in the modern world today, the ones that are being threatened to increase as like a mass detention, you can really see the echoes throughout history of when these things happen. It's like to an alarming end. Not just the harsh conditions, the like total control imposed over people's lives in these circumstances, but also the ways in which the people watching from the outside can, may be alarmed and shocked by it in the beginning when people are disappearing, when the students from their kids' class like don't come to school anymore, and the kids are having nightmares and wondering where their friends are. And like at first it was just this emotional shock for them, but then they kind of just like brush it under the rug or get used to it or move on. And I think that that's one of the things that scares me the most in this moment we're in history. Not that, like I said, none of these are like political manuals for what we should do in this moment, but I highly recommend reading this book. I think that it's like a very, very timely read. The next one, this one actually had been on my list for a long time to read. I'd actually started it long before I approached this migrant aesthetics literary journey that I'm on. But The Lost Children Archive by Valeria Luiselli. Gosh, how do I even describe it? It's like this, so a family's taking a road trip across the country. I think I had a really hard time getting into it to begin with because it like starts with this like relationship kind of falling apart, and I have had my own, for me, I was like, this is really difficult to read. And we hadn't even gotten to the like really heavy stuff yet. I was just like, oh no, the relationship troubles are really stressing me out. Anyway, I'm glad I pushed through because this book is incredible. The journey that they go on, the mother is like researching unaccompanied minors who have crossed the border on their own and are kind of like lost in the system now. Their mother's trying to find them. She doesn't know where they are. And so she wants to do that kind of like a documentary story, besides also like look for these little girls who are missing. But she also is like, that's because of her vocation. She's going to take this on as something that she wants to do research on and come up with a documentary story. Meanwhile, her husband, partner that she's having the relationship problems with, is researching the Apaches and kind of like this resistance to the colonization of the American West. And so the stories that they are like the conversations that they're having, the stories that they're taking in are being filtered down to their children. And so like their children are taking all of this in too, even though they're kids, so like they don't really understand it, but they're getting it all. And so that's when I did not expect that at some point in the book, the kids were going to start, one of the kids takes over the narrative. And it's just like, that's when all bets are off. This book is an emotional, heavy hitter. I will never listen to that David Bowie song. I think Starship is what it's called. I will never listen to that song the same way again. You'll have to read it and find out why. But I think this book is like required reading for anybody who cares about anything. Should read this book. Anyway, so the final recommendation that I have, this one, I feel like if you like this book, if this book is like feels like it speaks to you, we should be friends, because I feel that this book found me at the perfect moment when I was like thinking about a lot of things that this book talks about. I visited Honduras with my then fiance, now husband, to meet his family, and like this is about Zora Neale Hurston going to Honduras. And then after that, I then moved to Miami, which a lot of this is also about Zora Neale Hurston's life in Miami in the 1940s. And there were a lot of synchronicities, let's just say. But this book, one of the things that I thought was really, poetic about the journey of reading this book is of course, Zora Neale Hurston as a Black woman in the U.S. during, Jim Crow laws, pre the Civil Rights Movement. I guess, obviously the Civil Rights Movement's been a long journey ongoing, but she was in the South, and she did not have an easy life, and she did not hold a lot of privileges, especially as a woman, who was trying to earn her way in academia. She, really financially struggled in her life to make ends meet. However, you see through the course of this book that, like, once you take a step back into the, like, international landscape, like once she was in Honduras, this, like, U.S. passport privilege kind of kicks in, and the author does a really good job of, like, teasing out the power dynamics that can come into play there, and that it's not so simple as when we're just looking within the racial dynamics in a geographic location like the South, like the U.S. South. Things may feel fixed in this one way, but, like, once you remove it or add in these other groups or other factors, it, like, becomes extremely complicated and something that requires more exploration. So I highly recommend this book, The Chase and Ruins, Zora Neale Hurston in Honduras by Sharony Green. Fun fact, like, basically the reason she goes to Honduras is to try to find Mayan temple. So, like, she was like a anthropologist, I just am like, I kept having these fantasies about this getting turned into a movie where it's like Zora Neale Hurston in this kind of like Indiana Jones, like, an action adventure film. And so, yeah, anybody out there that makes movies, feel free to steal that idea from me. I highly recommend it. Yeah. And if you like any of these books, we should definitely be friends, because this is kind of the thing I'm thinking a lot about right now, not just professionally, because in my day job, I do work in immigration policy and politics, and in my relationship, I am in a relationship with someone who we kind of have a cross-border romance, because he cannot live in the US and I'm working here right now, and so we go back and forth. But also, I just started a newsletter to meet the moment that we're in politically. Because I've had the experience of living abroad, of immigrating, I thought that it would be a really useful service to create a newsletter about how to be an ally from abroad. So even if you're not currently living in the US, if you are appalled and horrified by the persecution and the scapegoating of immigrants that's happening in this country right now, that's what you can still do something about it. You can still speak up about it, and you're actually in a unique position to talk about the complicated power dynamics at play when we cross borders. So consider a subscribe. That newsletter goes out about once a week over on Substack, and I will include a link below. So yeah, until my next book review, hopefully sooner than 1 year from now, I'll see you next time.